The morning sun had barely risen when Mama Chike was already at the back of the house, bent over a big black basin. Her hands were deep inside cold water, red and wrinkled from scrubbing for hours. The soapy water splashed on her wrapper, leaving wet patches on her thighs. Around her were piles of clothes, wrappers, shirts, bed sheets, even underwear, stacked like small hills. These are not her clothes or her son's. It was Amaka's, her daughter-in-law, her son's wife. But that wasn't all, because Amaka had gone back inside to bring more. And this time, it was something you will never believe. The door creaked. Amaka stepped out slowly, tying her silky robe around her waist as though she had all the time in the world. Her belly was round and heavy with pregnancy, her skin glowing, her face calm and proud. She held a small nylon bag in her hand. Without looking down, she tossed it at Mama Chike's feet. The nylon made a soft thud on the wet ground. Mama Chike paused, her hands frozen in the cold water. She lifted her tired eyes to look at her daughter-in-law. "Mama," Amaka said, tossing a small nylon bag at her feet. "Those are my underwears. Wash them well, please. I don't want them smelling like damp rags." Mama Chike lowered her head. "Yes, Amaka," she said softly. Her voice was small, almost swallowed by the breeze. Amaka turned, stretching her arms lazily. "And don't waste detergent. After you finish, sweep the whole house. I don't want to see even one grain of sand." She walked back inside without another word, her steps slow and steady, like a queen returning to her throne. Mama Chike sighed deeply. She picked up the nylon bag and opened it. Inside were Amaka's underwear, delicate and colorful. Her lips trembled, but she said nothing. She dipped her hands back into the cold water and continued scrubbing, each stroke harder than the last, like she was scrubbing her own pain away. By the time she was done, her arms felt like logs of wood. Her back was bent, her knees stiff. She wrung the last cloth, water dripping onto the ground, like tears falling from tired eyes. She climbed the short steps to the backyard line and spread the clothes neatly, one by one. The wind caught them, making them dance like prisoners set free. There was no time to rest. Beside the kitchen wall stood an old broom with worn-out bristles. Mama Chike picked it up, her fingers weak, and walked into the living room. The living room was white, its tiled floor shining faintly in the sunlight. She began to sweep carefully, her strokes steady and slow. Amaka sat on the sofa, one hand resting on her swollen belly, the other holding her phone. She scrolled lazily, her face calm, her lips curved in a faint smile. After a while, she raised her head and clicked her tongue. "Again, Mama." "Sweep it again," she ordered, her tone sharp and impatient. "You just push the dust to the corners. I don't want to breathe it. You know I have asthma." Mama Chike's heart sank, but she said nothing. She bent again and swept the whole floor a second time, slower and more carefully, even though there was no dust left to sweep. When she finished, sweat dripped down her temples, sliding into her eyes. Her chest rose and fell like a drum in the hands of a restless drummer. Amaka stood, sniffing the air. "Ehen, finally," she said, her nose wrinkled. "But the sink is full of dirty plates." "You didn't think to wash them? Or do you want me to bend over this belly and do it myself?" Mama Chike's voice trembled. I'll wash them." "Good," Amaka replied coldly, sitting back down. "And after that, cook beans for me, with fried plantain." "The baby is hungry." Mama Chike turned toward the kitchen without a word. Her footsteps were slow and heavy, like a woman walking under the weight of 100 stones. That was a typical day in the life of Mama Chike, mother to Chik, mother-in-law to Amaka, a woman who once ruled her home with an iron tongue, now taking instructions like a housemaid. But why? You see, 3 months earlier, when Amaka first entered that house as Chike's new bride, everyone in the town had been stunned, not because of her beauty, though she was striking, but because she was pregnant, and Mama Chike, who had driven away 3 former wives for barrenness. The first was Neka, a shy school teacher with a soft voice and kind eyes. She came into the house like morning dew, gentle, quiet, eager to please. But 6 months passed, and there was no sign of a child. One evening, as the moon sat high in the sky, Mama Chike's voice had roared like thunder. "You are using contraceptives. You don't want my son to have children." Nika had fallen to her knees, tears running down her face like streams during heavy rain. "No, Mama. I swear, I would never do such a thing." But Mama Chike's heart was a closed door. By the next market day, Nika's things were packed and left by the gate. She walked away, her head bent, her shadow long and broken. The second was Bola, a city woman, tall and elegant, with the sharpness of a Lagos banker. She wore perfume that lingered like secrets and spoke with confidence that filled the room. For a while, Mama Chike tried to like her, but one evening, Bola had returned home pale and trembling. She sat on the edge of the bed, her hands on her flat stomach. "Mama," she whispered, I lost the baby." Mama Chike's eyes had narrowed like the slit of a machete. "You lie. There was never a baby." "No, Mama, please." "Pack your things," Mama Chike shouted. The next morning, Bola was gone, leaving behind only her perfume and silence. The third was Adaora, sweet Ada, the town tailor. Her laughter was soft like a flute, and her hands were quick like a needle in the wind. She loved Chike deeply and thought patience would win Mama Chike's heart. But 10 moons passed, still no child. One night, Adaora cried in the corner of her room, holding a tiny piece of cloth she had sewn for the baby she prayed for. She had suffered a miscarriage in secret, her body broken, her spirit crushed. When Mama Chike heard, she spat on the ground. "Excuses! My son is not a test animal. Pack your load and leave Adaora left before sunrise," her tears wetting the path as she walked away. Now, Amaka stood in the same house where 3 women had been thrown out like old mats. And Mama Chike, the same woman who had roared like fire before, was quiet. She did not protest. She did not shout. She did not even question why Amaka's belly was already full before the wedding. Whispers began to swirl through Umuoma like harmattan doors. At the well, women bent low to fill their buckets and whispered behind their palms. "Maybe she gave Chike a love potion," one said, her eyes darting. "Or maybe this one is truly the chosen one," another replied, nodding slowly. But only Amaka knew the truth, and she kept it buried beneath her calm eyes and quiet smile. The night was quiet, too quiet. The moon hung high like a pale eye in the sky, watching over the sleeping town. Inside the house, everyone had gone to bed. The only sound was the faint cry of a night bird and the whisper of the wind against the windows. Mama Chike could not sleep. Her mind was restless, tossing and turning like clothes in a wash basin. She rose from her mat, tied her wrapper firmly, and went to the kitchen to warm some water for tea. Her hands were tired, her body heavy, but her heart felt heavier. As she walked back toward her room, carrying a small flask, she heard a soft voice coming from the backyard. It was Amaka. She was speaking in low tones. but the words floated through the still air like smoke. I don't care, Amaka whispered sharply. He believes the baby is his. Once the child is born and the will is read, I'm done. Mama Chike froze where she stood, her body stiff like a carved statue. Her ears strained to catch every word. Her breath caught in her throat. There was silence for a moment. Then Amaka spoke again, her voice cold, sharp, and bitter. That old woman will scrap this house until her knees bleed. She destroyed others, especially Adaora. Now she will pay. The flask slipped from Mama Chike's trembling hands and crashed to the floor with a loud clatter. Hot water spilled across the tiles, steaming like angry spirits rising. Amaka spun around quickly, her eyes flashing in the dim moonlight. Mama, she said, her voice suddenly calm but dangerous. Were you listening? Mama Chike's hands flew to her mouth, her chest pounding like a drum. Her knees weakened and she stumbled backward, tears already rushing down her wrinkled cheeks. Her lips shook as she whispered, the baby is not Cheeks. Amaka's face slowly curved into a cold, mocking smile. She took one step forward, her shadow stretching across the floor like a snake. Did Adaora's truth matter when you threw her out? She asked, her voice dripping with venom. Mama Chike's heart broke. The room spun around her. The words stabbed deep, like sharp knives cutting old wounds wide open. Her tears fell faster now, her breath coming in short, painful gasps. The truth she had never imagined stood before her, smiling, and in that moment, Mama Chike realized she was no longer the master of her home. She was the prisoner. For 2 days, no one spoke freely. Chike sensed something was wrong. Mama, he said softly, what's happening? You've been quiet. You don't even smile at me anymore. Mama Chike quickly shook her head, forcing a small, tight smile. Nothing, my son. I am fine. Chike frowned. Her voice was too quick, too shaky, like dry leaves rattling in the wind. He turned to Amaka. Amaka, do you know what's going on? Amaka's lips curved into a gentle, sweet smile. Maybe Mama is just tired, she said softly, her hand resting on her belly. You know she works so hard these days. Perhaps she just needs more rest. Her voice was calm, like cool water poured over hot coals. Chike nodded slowly, but his eyes still searched his mother's face. Something felt wrong, deeply wrong, but he could not place it. Mama Chike kept her gaze fixed on her food, unable to meet her son's eyes. Her heart was heavy, like a clay pot filled with stones. Now she understood why Amaka was truly in the house. Not just for love, not even for the child she carried, but for revenge. The words she had overheard in the dark still rang in her ears. That old woman will scrub this house until her knees bleed. Mama Chike's chest tightened. She wanted to scream the truth, to warn Chike, to make him see the danger before it was too late. But if she spoke, it would crush him like a fallen tree. And most of all, the reason why she had been wanting a baby will be for nothing. So, she stayed silent and broken. She carried the truth alone, like a wound no one could see, while the house grew quieter and colder with each passing hour. The day finally came. The morning sky glowed faintly, and the compound buzzed with movement. Voices rose and fell. Footsteps hurried across the floor, and the air smelled of boiled water and palm oil. From inside the room, Amaka's cries echoed, sharp and heavy. Mama! She screamed, gripping the edge of the bed. Midwives surrounded her, whispering, Push, Amaka, push! The baby is almost here. Mama Chike stood outside the door, her hands pressed tightly together. Her lips trembled as she muttered silent prayers, her chest rising and falling like pounding drums. Her heart was a river of fear and hope mixed together. Then a sharp, loud cry filled the room, the cry of new life. The midwives cheered. "He's here!" "A healthy baby boy," one of them shouted. Mama Chike staggered forward, tears streaming down her face. She pushed open the door and saw Amaka lying on the bed, her face glistening with sweat. In the arms of one midwife was a small baby, his skin soft and pink, his cries strong and clear. Cheek burst into the room moments later, his face glowing with joy. He rushed to his wife and scooped the baby into his arms. Tears rolled down his cheeks as he whispered, "My son, my own son." Amaka smiled faintly, her voice weak but proud. "Look, Chike, look at him." Chike kissed the baby's tiny forehead. "We will name him Ifechukwu," he said firmly, "because this child is truly God's gift to us." The house soon filled with family members, neighbors, and laughter. Women brought gifts of yams, oil, and cloth. Men congratulate Chike, clapping him on the back. Voices rose in excitement, songs floated through the compound, and the baby's cries blended with the celebration. But in the corner, Mama Chike sat quietly on a low stool, her hands folded tightly on her lap. She smiled faintly whenever someone looked her way, but deep inside, her heart sank like a stone sinking into dark water. Her eyes followed Amaka, her son, and the baby, and a shadow of fear lingered in her chest. Later that evening, when the visitors had quieted and the room was filled with soft chatter, a man in a fine suit arrived. He was the family lawyer, carrying a brown leather folder. He cleared his throat and spoke loudly so everyone could hear. "As per the wishes of the late Chief Okonkwo," he began, "I will now read his will." The room fell silent. Even the baby stopped crying, as if the whole house was holding its breath. The lawyer opened the folder and read slowly. "It is written that the first male grandchild of Chief Okonkwo shall inherit all properties in Umuoma and the properties in Enugu." The room erupted with applause and shouts of joy. Women ululated, men clapped, and Chike lifted his baby high into the air, laughing with pride. But Mama Chike, she did not clap, though she was relieved. She did not laugh, though she was happy. Her heart sank deeper than ever before, sinking into a darkness only she could feel. Her eyes glistened as she looked at the baby, then at Amaka, who sat smiling sweetly on the bed. This was all the reason why Mama Chike has been chasing away women from Chike all this while. Just because they can't give him a baby, and most especially, a son. A chill ran through Mama Chike's bones. The celebration around her sounded distant, like voices coming from another world. After the celebration, the lawyer explained, "Please, everyone, let us settle down," he said firmly. The chatter slowly died, and all eyes turned to him. "There is one last thing," the lawyer continued, his voice steady. "As part of the late Chief Okonkwo's instructions, before any inheritance is officially transferred, there must be proof of paternity." He paused, looking around the room. "A DNA test will be done to confirm that this child truly belongs to Chief's son." The room went completely silent. The earlier joy seemed to vanish into thin air. Even the baby stirred lightly, sensing the sudden tension in the air. Chike blinked, confused. "A DNA test?" he asked slowly. The lawyer nodded. "Yes, sir." Chief Okonkwo was a very careful man. He wanted to avoid any disputes in the future. Some relatives nodded in agreement. "It makes sense," one uncle said. "Better to be sure now than to fight later." Chike smiled faintly, and looked down at the baby in his arms. "Of course," he said confidently. "We will do the test. There is nothing to fear." But in the corner of the room, Mama Chike's body went cold. Her breath caught in her throat, and the ground beneath her feet seemed to tilt. Her late husband's voice echoed in her mind, words he had spoken to her long ago, sharp and firm. "No child shall inherit unless it is truly of my blood." She understood then why he had added this condition. He knew the power and greed that could tear families apart. Mama Chike's hands shook in her lap. Her eyes darted to Amaka, who was watching quietly, her face calm but unreadable. A slow, secret smile curved Amaka's lips for just a brief moment, and Mama Chike's heart sank deeper. She knew the truth. She knew what that test would reveal, and she knew it would destroy everything. Chike's joy, his pride, his future. It would shatter him like a clay pot falling on hard ground. So she stayed silent. She forced her face to remain blank, hiding the storm raging inside her. She could not speak. Not yet. Not when the whole family was watching. As laughter slowly returned to the room, Mama Chike sat like a statue in the corner, her heart pounding like the beat of a war drum, praying for a miracle she knew would never come. 2 weeks passed slowly, each day heavier than the one before. The air in the house was thick, as if even the walls were holding their breath, waiting. On a Thursday evening, the sound of a car rolling into the compound broke the silence. It wasn't Chike's car. It was the lawyer's. Mama Chike, who had been seated in the corner, peeling yam, froze. Her hands trembled, and one yam slice slipped from her fingers to the floor. Her heart pounded like drums at a town festival. The front door creaked open. Inside, Amaka sat calmly on the sofa, her arms folded neatly across her chest, her face smooth and unreadable. Her lips curved in the faintest shadow of a smile. Moments later, Chike walked in, wiping sweat from his brow. He stopped abruptly when he saw the lawyer's car parked outside. Then his eyes darted to the lawyer standing in the sitting room. "What is going on?" he asked, his voice heavy with worry. No one answered. The lawyer cleared his throat, holding a brown envelope. "Good evening, sir," he said respectfully. "I was instructed to deliver this directly to you." Chike's eyes moved from the envelope to his mother, then to Amaka. His stomach twisted into knots. "What's inside?" he asked cautiously. The lawyer hesitated, then spoke plainly. "The result of the DNA test, sir. A condition set by the late Chief Okonkwo's will." Mama Chike's breath caught. Her hands gripped the edge of her wrapper tightly, her knuckles white. Her body felt like it was sinking into the floor. Chike stepped forward slowly and took the envelope. His fingers shook as he tore it open. He unfolded the paper and scanned the words once, twice. Then, like a dry leaf falling from a tree, the paper slipped from his hand and fluttered to the ground. Silence filled the room. The only sound was the baby crying softly in the distance. Chike's lips parted, his voice breaking. "Probability of paternity, 0.00%. The words seemed to echo through the house, bouncing off the walls and shattering the joy that once lived there. Mama Chike gasped loudly, clutching her chest. "No, no, no, no," she cried, tears spilling freely down her face. Chike turned slowly toward his wife, his face pale, his whole body trembling. "Amaka," he whispered, his voice so soft it was almost gone. "Tell me this isn't true." Amaka stood up slowly, gracefully, like a queen rising from her throne. Her face was calm, her eyes sharp. I never said it was yours, she said coldly. You assumed. Chike stumbled backward, shaking his head in disbelief. Why would you do this to me? He shouted, his voice breaking like thunder in a storm. Amaka's gaze hardened. Ask your mother, she replied bitterly, pointing toward Mama Chike. Ask her what she did to the women before me. Ask her why she drove them out one by one. Chike spun around to his mother, his whole body trembling. Mama, he said hoarsely, his voice filled with pain. Is this true? Mama Chike fell to her knees, sobbing. Yes, my son, she wept. I wanted a grandchild. I wanted an heir for your father's name. I chased them away. Neka, Bola, Adaora. I said they were barren, but, oh Chike, I was wrong. I was blinded by my pride. Chike staggered, his heart splitting apart. He turned back to Amaka, his tears mixing with anger. You knew all along, and you still did this? Amaka let out a cold, bitter laugh. Yes, she said, her voice like ice. Now you have a child, Mama Chike. A child you wanted so badly. But it is not your blood. The word struck like a sword, cutting through the air. Mama Chike fell forward, wailing loudly, while Chike stood frozen, his world crashing down around him. The house shook with Chike's voice. Get out of my house, he roared, his chest rising and falling like a stormy sea. Amaka stood calmly, her face as still as a pond on a quiet night. Without a word, she went to the bedroom, strapped the baby tightly to her back, and picked up her travel bag. As she reached the door, she paused and turned slowly. Her eyes were sharp, her voice cold like morning dew on iron. You made women cry, Mama Chike, she said, her tone cutting through the air like a blade. You chased them, mocked them, called them barren. Now you have washed my underwear, cooked my meals, and swept my floors. You raised my revenge with your own hands. Mama Chike trembled where she stood, unable to speak. Her tears fell silently, soaking into her wrapper. Amaka pulled the door open and stepped out, slamming it behind her. The loud bang echoed through the house like a final drumbeat. By the next day, the story had spread through Umuoma like wildfire on dry grass. Townspeople gathered under the big tree and at the water well, whispering and shaking their heads. Did you hear what happened in Mama Chike's house? One woman asked, eyes wide with shock. I heard it all, another replied. Some say Amaka is evil, but others say she is brave, a third woman added softly. They say she taught Mama Chike a lesson she will never forget. The town was divided. Some spat in disgust at Amaka's name. Others secretly admired her boldness. But everyone agreed on one thing. Nothing like this had ever happened before. From that day on, Mama Chike became a ghost in her own home. She no longer came out to sit in the sun or chat with neighbors. The compound, once full of noise and laughter, became as quiet as a graveyard. I hope you enjoyed the story. If so, please like the video, comment what you learned from the tale, share with friends and family, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more African folk tales just like this one. Thank you.